Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a long way from home for many of you, and first time to Singapore, so thank you for the opportunity to come, and I'm happy to pay my own way to come to such a beautiful place and to be with you. What I want to share with you today is my background is in imaging. I spent many years. My first paper in electron microscopy is 1976, a while ago, and spent a great deal of my career doing live cell imaging and electrophysiology and molecular uncaging and all that kind of stuff that many of you are familiar with. But 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to become the first director of core facilities. Leong and I were together. He was in charge of the imaging, and I had all the rest of the school. That's the engineering school, the medical school, the arts and sciences, all of the core facilities. And we sat side by side for a number of 3 years as we tried to get our head around the complexity of the problem of what is it you're all trying to do, we're all trying to do. So I'm going to share with you what I've learned in the last 11 to 12 years, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and I think where we are today. So the slides, is this?
Possibly.
It does. Institutionally, I'm here to represent now, I was the director of cores, then an assistant, associate vice president. I'm here to sort of give you institutionally why we care about what you do. Here are 5 of the reasons. It facilitates interdisciplinary research. And to the PIs, what that means is they can move fluidly between fields. If they want to do proteomics and they have no clue what proteomics is, if you do this right, they just go to the proteomics facility and tell them about the problem and work with them collectively. And again, it's in-house, so it's right down the street or sometimes right down the hall. It facilitates faculty recruitment and retention. Don't underestimate that. We leverage our core facilities in that process. Also on the financial side, which we can talk about later. External partnerships, both academic and commercial. I brokered an MOU with our partner universities in Chicago, that's the University of Chicago and UIC. So the 3 of us share each other's core facilities. Early on, there was concern we'd be competing. Sure, you're competing, that's a good thing. So it has not turned out to be a detriment. We've now had a formal agreement since 2014. And it advances the research enterprise. Northwestern, we don't have all fields represented, but we have 4 primary areas. We have engineering school, chemistry department. Our chemistry department is our elite department. Our chemistry department is what Northwestern is known for, excuse me. If you go to the University of Chicago, they're known for the physics department. If you go to Northwestern, it's the chemistry department. We have 2 Nobel laureates. We have 4 Feynman Award winners. I don't know how any assistant professor makes it in that department, but it's a tough department, and they have their own core facilities. And then biomedical, which spans the 2 campuses in Chicago and Evanston, 12 miles apart, and medical school downtown. And when I say medicine, I mean clinical. These are core facilities that are patient-oriented. I oversee all of them. There's about 45 of them here represented. Originally, I was the first core director. Now I have one of our elite core directors has moved into that role. We have 2 staff, a finance and assistant. It took several years to get those positions. I have an advisory board. This is absolutely essential. When I go around giving talks to presidents, vice presidents, provosts at universities all around the country, and a year ago right now I was in China at 3 universities talking with these leaders. This is essential because these are the research deans, the AVPs, these are the people making the decisions on the research enterprise, and they need to buy in. So I created an advisory board in 2013. I started in 2009. The first 3 years was half-time as we started to think, what would a core director do? It wasn't even a full-time job. But then it became a full-time job, and I created this advisory. And down below, you can get this. We'll make the slides available, are sort of the value propositions. So that's the leadership team, centrally. And then I published this paper last summer with 3 of my colleagues from Northwestern. Basically, what have we learned? And here are the 4 things I want you to walk away with learning that institutionally we consider absolutely essential if this is going to work as a career path. And that is, starts with the personnel. We'll go through each one of these with you. In the space, that is their own space. They run their labs. Investment by the institution, and then the evaluative process. We do all 4 of these. It's been a gradual process. We're getting better and better at it. I think we've honed that fairly well. So let me start with the employees. We have, as it says here, full-time. That means at least 75% of their effort. What would the other 25%? It might be on a grant. It might be working, they don't work at the Kmart, but there are other contracts that they might have with the industry, for example, that covers their salaries. Most of them, a good percentage, are research faculty. We'll talk more about that shortly. Research associates, postdocs. Yes, we have 8 postdocs now working in core facilities specifically. 6 of them have already made the decision. 2 of them are 50%. They're 50% in the core, on staff, fee for service, and 50% working on a project for a PI in the core as they transition and think about, do they really want to do this as a career? And then senior technologists altogether, 73 PhDs last year working in core facilities, 131 total staff. Now the research faculty, I've been working for 2 years now with the Provost's office how to change this, because research faculty doesn't really capture what they do. At Northwestern at least, research faculty generally don't teach. Our core directors teach in the curriculum for credit courses. So we have to think this through. They're not truly research faculty. They're not on soft money. They're not grant to grant. They are on everybody else's grants. So the institution has come, the Provost's office, to appreciate that this is not the same model. And so the term that they've come up with, the medical school is happy to just say assistant professor, associate, full professor, non-tenure track 5, and they have a team science track. But in the Provost's office, on the Evanston campus in particular, because the parents of undergraduates who come expect a faculty member who is an assistant associate full to be somebody they're paying an awful lot of money to send their children to undergraduate, to a private school, are uncomfortable with using that term. So they've come up, the Provost's office looked across the country at titles and came up with professor of practice. And we said, I'd never heard of a professor of practice. Well, it turns out there's quite a number of elite universities that have this track. So we're exploring it right now as an option. All right, so titles matter somewhat. Job families, Northwestern was not the first. In fact, I went to a Midwest chapter meeting of the AVRF when I first heard about staff, specifically for course. So it's a 2-year process. We worked with HR and got it done. These are non-exempt staff and exempt staff. And as you can see, the non-exempt staff, again, in the US, exempt is exempt from labor laws. So if you're an exempt, that means you're salaried. You don't have to work 40 hours a week, you don't keep track of your hours. But the non-exempt do. So they're inward focused, they're technique solving, they're PI outsourcing, right? This is a way for the PIs to understand. This is as if they were hired in your lab, but they're hired in the core, shared with others. Whereas the exempt staff are outward focused. They work with the clients, they're problem solvers, they're consultants. They'd be more like a consultant on the grant. So these are very clear. Also, the salaries here are much higher than our incoming research technicians, so their criterion, what kind of experience they have to be hired. And Northwestern, again, is not the only, if you go to university with this job families, you go to the ABRF website under career development, you'll see a host of them that I put up there from different schools, listing the job descriptions and details if you want to learn more about it. Well, whether they're staff or faculty in cores, they certainly need professional development. So the technical skills, by and large, we all know you come with that. You wouldn't be in a core facility if you didn't already have it. Writing skills, that's a little more iffy, especially for people with technical backgrounds. Some are good at writers, some not so much. You need that skill to develop that skill. The business skills, this is the 6th year now of our Kellogg School of Management. That's our business school, one of the elite ones in the United States. I convinced them a number of years ago to create a course specifically for the core directors and for the core administrators who oversee the finances. And so it's a 1-week course. We've now in its 6th year, a very successful course, and it helps build the business skills of our scientists. Leadership skills, which again is really more on the job, experiential in learning. And mentorship, I created a group mentorship program at Northwestern, but I was the lead on the AVRF's National Mentorship Program, which is a partnership with NRMN, the National Research Mentorship Network, and NIH supported network in the US. Now, that was the first pillar. It begins, a core facility is not a place, a room with the equipment in it. It begins with the people. And the value proposition, when I go around giving talks, it begins with, you want the very best people. If you don't get the very best people, this isn't going to be the value proposition we bargained for. But secondly, when you get those people, it's their lab. This is not shared space. And we've spent, 3 of the 4 here, over $20 million. When's the last time a assistant professor got a $20 million lab? Doesn't happen, but our core directors do. I'll show you one of them here. This is the chemistry lab. Again, it's the lead department. It's a $20 million lab. This was an infill. On the left-hand and the right-hand sides are the walls of the exterior of the building. We put a roof over the top of it and built it all in with cranes up above to move the NMRs around. And then across from this area, there's 8 NMRs in this space. On the right side, through the wall into the labs, are the mass spec and different rooms there, X-ray, crystallography, X-ray diffraction facilities. They have classrooms where they do teaching. And again, this is a serious investment, right? These are cores, but this is the core directors being responsible for not only their own lab space and everything that comes, all the responsibilities that come with that, but also the teaching that comes with it. So MCIRC, the acronym for this chemistry, does all the undergraduate teaching in chemistry, all the graduate teaching in chemistry. This is the labs, this is where it all happens. They have instructors that are also part of the facility. So this is kind of like core facilities on steroids, right? This is what it looks like. This is what the future is going to look like. Core facilities taking over. And the reason for that is the faculty are not teaching this anymore, what's happening in their core facilities. Somebody's got to teach this, otherwise it's NMR cannot be a black box for these students. This is elite programs, right? So somebody's got to do that, and the cores are doing it. The third pillar of investment here for sustainability is institutional support, and I'm serious when I say generous. Since 2009 when I started, there was support before, but we doubled the support when Leon and I took over at that time. This was because Lyrica had been invented at Northwestern, and the proceeds from some of those payouts went to the Office for Research, and they earmarked it for core facilities. And so you'll see there that Office for Research and Core Facility Administration is about $2.5 million a year. There's administrative support, annual equipment grants, annual operating support, voucher programs. Voucher programs are such a creative, I think, instrumental way. It not only incentivizes instrument writing by the faculty, who are not part of the core, but they want an instrument and they're willing to write. The cores write the majority of them, but the faculty, if they write an instrumentation grant to an agency and we get the grant, we give them a voucher to use it. So that basically it's free, so they're incentivized to write it. We also have vouchers when we recruit faculty now. When we recruit them, we give them, let's say, $300,000 a year to spend in core facilities. And we learned the hard way. We put it in an account now that can't be spent anywhere else because they were spending it in other areas. We're like, no, that wasn't the deal here. The deal was you're going to spend it. And that, for an administrator, that's a very effective way of making sure your core facilities can meet their bottom line, because you're giving the money to your recruits and your retention packages to be spent in core facilities. The medical school invests about $2 million a year now. It used to be $1 million, Leon, now it's up to $2 million. Same thing, they get it, right? Rex and Jeff have done just such a marvelous job. These are our colleagues, that it's not just the Office for Research, it's the schools as well. And then the provost office, which are a loan program. That's something that one of my colleagues, Leon, Jen Chow, came up with. She's another associate VP, and that is, we got millions of dollars invested in equipment. How are we going to sustain this? So we convinced the provost to give us money to create a loan program. So now we give the money to the core, they buy the instrument, but they have to pay us back. And they pay us back over a 10-year amortized program, and that goes back into the pool where we can give the money out as well. I mentioned retention recruitment packages and lab construction. That's from the provost office. So one of the cool things that I've learned over the years is about buckets of money. Buckets of money is the euphemism we use to say there's different line items in a university budget for the schools, for the deans, for Office for Research, for the provost office. And some of them could be spent in core facilities. And that's part of how I spend my time, snooping around to find out where those buckets are. Right? And faculty retention and recruitment has been the most lucrative one, because now any instrument that wants to be part of a retention or recruitment package ends up in a core facility. It mostly works the following way. The deans who are on my advisory, research deans on the advisory will come to me and say, well, when we recruit this person, they've asked for an instrument that's $1 million. We'd like to put it in a core. No problem, let me talk to them. And I explain to them, well, you know, there's a buried cost here that you're gonna have to be responsible for. That's the technical support, the service contracts. In 5 years, you're gonna be looking to replace that instrument, put it in a core facility, that's their problem. And I'll give you money to use it for free. Now, as long as that core knows what it's doing, and we'll get there how we know that's the case, it's been an easy sell. My office, the Core Facility Administration, we provide the StrataCore. Where is Spencer? Where are you, Spencer? There he is. We created our own when we started this process back in 2009. But StrataCore is an excellent one. iLabs is another one. These are excellent commercial programs. We just did our own in-house because at the time we just did it. And without that, you can't keep track of what's happening. It's not just for the cores themselves, it's institutionally so we know what's going on. I'm going to show you some of the data that we pulled, and it's extremely important for me to make the case to upper management. Annual evaluations, talk a little bit more about that. We manage that. We manage policies and regulations, which are mostly financial, how the money is managed, marketing and university industry partnerships, and I already mentioned some of the professional development, but notice the publication guidelines. Again, we put another committee, just like the job families, together of our core directors and ask the question, you know, what's happening? I need you to publish, you know, I need you to stay on top of your game. How do you in a fee-for-service model end up on paper? And we developed a set of guidelines that follow international standards, but basically I'll give you just one example of several. We had one facility where the PI asked if they would do an experiment for them. Fine. Analyze the data. Okay, fine. Generate a figure. Okay, write the figure legend. And didn't even get acknowledged on the paper. It's like, no, that can't happen. So the research dean, so I was going to just kick them out of using the core facilities. And the research dean said, no, we have a process. Send it to us. We will manage this for you. And I said, thank you. It's not a fun process, but we have then put in place measures to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Now, in a fee-for-service environment, you're not publishing all the time. It's a lot of acknowledgments, but there are times increasingly when you're becoming the expert, especially when you get into design, or early in the design phase. Authorship should be negotiated at that stage, and that's what the guidelines are all about. So, improvements in the lab and construction, that's done. That's another bucket. Out of, you know, you're in a core facility and you're asking, you're responsible for getting new equipment, but you're not necessarily responsible for making the place look nice, right? Well, if you want you want to recruit good people and you want tour groups to come through, you've got to make these places look nice. And I saw facilities today, yeah, like that, you know, glass doors with your name on it so that people know you're an entity where you are and not just some corner of somebody's laboratory. And the provost office has been generous in giving us support for that. So how do you measure success? Another paper that I wrote with some of my colleagues from ABRF back in 16 metrics for success. We list out a whole bunch of ways in which your institution, I think of it as like a smorgasbord. You know, we've got tables in there. You know, decide for yourself what's important, but be careful what you decide, because whatever you decide to evaluate is going to affect change in behavior. So be thoughtful about what it is that you really want, because that's what you'll get. Financial support. So one of the ways in which one might, is central administration, is look at the finances. I'm going to take you past finances, but we might begin here and ask ourselves, just in fiscal year 18, notice that we had total expenditures in 40-some odd cores of 34 million, internal revenue of 23, external 6. So that left us with 86% recovery, and then the rest of the recovery has to come from the schools and the centers and grants, big center grants. And then subsidies, this is where some of that other comes from. Total internal investment then, through those various programs I've been telling you about, is 7.4. And here's the take-home message, this was in the article. What you want to notice about this graph is two things. First, the blue is the recharge revenue, And the colored bar here, the group of colors on it, that's the internal investment. And except for the 2010 year, which was the era, which was Obama's investment in core facilities as part of an investment in NIH, there was a lot of additional money that went into cores. Except for that year, our investment institutionally has been fairly flat. But notice it took about 5 years to get this going, and now it's taken off. And we just closed August 31st, that's our fiscal year, so I can tell you this year it's 32.5. And so that's gonna put us about right here. It's still going up. That's the amount of recharge revenue that faculty are paying off of their grants to use our core facility. Number of cores hasn't changed. Amount of internal investment hasn't changed. What has happened is cultural change. Faculty now use the cores for most of their work, as long as the core has capabilities that they need. The fourth pillar, so I mentioned finances is a way, but it became very important to both Leon and I early on. We were hearing, oh, you guys care about his money. You just want us to balance our, and you've probably heard that before. Well, we're here to tell you, starting in 2009, we knew we wanted to change. So we moved to what's called the balanced scorecard. I'll show you on the next slide a little more about that. And that is one of 8 parameters is money. Financially, how are you doing? The other 7 are all the other value propositions that a core facility brings, and we evaluate across those other categories as well. We do an institutional every year wide user survey. We get uniquely between 22 and 2,500 responses each year, which still only represents 30% of our users, but that's a good swath. And then we give annual awards. We do external review with experts. They come on site, and then I'll show you a couple of examples. So now I'm going to walk you through this. Balanced scorecard, this is Harvard Business School, 1992. Other businesses, but tech-based. When we're asking similar questions, how do we evaluate in the tech world whether we're doing a good job? And what this report from Harvard Business School said is, decide on what's valuable to you. Make that decision, and then build your valuation around it. So for us, in the core facility world, it's administration and the leadership. And each one of these is scored, and what we're doing is we're asking, do you have an administrator? Do you have a faculty advisory committee? Do you have a faculty director? The faculty director is that 5 or 10% effort of some faculty member who's helping you navigate the political complexities, maybe has expertise in the area, maybe not, but they have to have one. The advisory committee are the main users. You get the idea. Technical staff, how are they doing in their career development? Resource management, that's the finances. Customer publications, education outreach, those are really of value to the institution. Communication and service, and an important self-assessment. How do you think you're doing? And the more critical they are of themselves, the higher the scores we give them. Can you hold just, I'm going to get through it and then we'll come back. So in each individual core gets feedback. They get a spider diagram with text that goes along with how did they score in each of those categories. So this is a snapshot of an individual core. That would be an outstanding core that got scored that well. This is across all the cores. They get this. They get their own this, and they get this from all the cores. The size of the bubble is how many other cores scored excellent in that category, number 1, 2, 3, 4, across. So each of them knows where they scored, and they can compare themselves with the others. Then we do program review. Text way too small for you to read. This is 2010, 11, 13, 15, 16. We did it again in 18. These are the cores, what school they're in, who the external experts are. They're from Genelia, they're from MIT, Harvard, I mean the best schools. And the key in program review is I ask them, whose opinion do you want? I don't pick, they pick. Then I go check to make sure it's not their cousin or somebody. Or that they did their postdoc with them. I tell them, no, can't be that. But if they want to pick somebody, they know, like in this room, if you were to pick somebody, that's okay. And then we have a conversation with that person and say, we really want you to tell us what you think. And they do. Always, they do. Behind closed doors, they're willing to tell us, and then we act on it. So we're trying to improve. As we tell them, we're not trying to close the facility, we're trying to improve it. Tell us what we need to do. And then how do we do? Well, we're close to the end now. This is the National Cancer Institute Cancer Center support grants. In 2013, we had 12 cores, 1 exceptional, Leon's, of course. You were always what can I say? He set the bar. And 7 outstandings, but look at 18. Now we had 14 cores and everybody made the top 2 categories. These are external reviewers from the National Cancer Institute and their hired guns who do nothing but evaluate cores around the country. And now we're being recognized as clearly doing a good job. And instrumentation grants is a little bit mixed up because the Aero was its own special year. DoD has its, Department of Defense has its own program, but we have been very successful year after year now. And then these are grants specifically for cores. And we got renewed. This is Material Science and Engineering, NSF, and P30, which are center core grants, and we've just been going up and up, so doing well. And 2 more slides. Here's the national recognition. The imaging facility that Leon used to manage, and under his leadership became one of the Nikon imaging centers. Then under Josh Rappaport it continued, and now under Dina Arvanitis continues to be a Nikon. There's only 3 in the US. Nuance and Engineering Corps is one of the 16 national nanofabrication centers in the US, and IMSERT, the chemistry, and these are 3 schools: medical school, arts and engineering school, and the arts and sciences. And Sir Francis Stoddard, when he recently won his Nobel Prize, pointed out it wouldn't have been possible without this facility. And last, and this is the one I'm most proud of, which is what has happened to our core directors. Leon moved on then to become the director of the Advanced Imaging Facility back in 2014 at the HHMI. Andy Ott moved up from the chemistry core to become the next director of core, following in my footsteps as I became involved in other things at the university. Josh, who then replaced Leon, has just recently, a few months ago, became the executive director of all the cores at Boston College, across 3 schools. And Ben Myers, Leon, did you know Ben? Ben came later, got his PhD in the core facility, became the director in this imaging of the engineering school, and was just named the new director of all research cores at Yale. So we've had 4 of our core directors move on now to become administrators, overseeing a recognition for, I think, the program. And that's it. Now I'll take questions.
Thank you, Phil, very much. A very informative talk, very interesting. Clearly a question from John. So
yes.
No, I mean, you are square already almost, but when you are running external evaluation, okay, and as you said, you do the self-assessment, okay? So you do this kind of thing as well. But, do you have any discussion with the external evaluation board? Because I think it's interesting to have the self-evaluation, okay, self-assessment, but to be sure that the evaluation will be, taking into account really what is inside yourself.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Because
so
this is 2 external. So.
It was 3 originally, now we're down to 2. I think 2 can do the job if you pick the right 2. I think if I understand the question, it is, do we have detailed conversations with the externals in particular about that? I mentioned that briefly, but I can tell you it's behind closed doors. We meet with them the night before a dinner, before they see the core, and then they get our perspective as to why we're doing the review. And by the way, at schools like Northwestern, private schools, program review happens to every unit. My department, physiology at the medical school, I've been reviewed in my 32 years, 4 times I've been through program review. So they're not being picked on. We tell them, everybody gets reviewed. Every office for research. My CFA got reviewed just 3 years ago. Everybody gets reviewed, so that relieves the pressure. But I'm here to tell you that your colleagues in this room, if we pick them to review your core facility, we would sit down with them and talk to them, and they'll tell us everything. They may not tell you about, because what we're trying to convince them is, how do we make this work for this person? How do we make it work? We're on the same side here, but be frank. What's the strengths, what's the weaknesses, what is it that we need to do here institutionally? And it can't be spend more money on it. It's like, well, we could do that, but tell us what it is we're doing, that we should do better.
Jan, would you like to? Phil, thanks so much. That was really excellent. I think it's certainly my colleagues at EMB, but I think several others in this room probably really can use this for inspiration, how to make a very strong case for the utility, of course, and how really to embed them in the institutional organization also. I wanted to ask specifically about the careers of your service staff, because that's kind of the theme of this meeting here, and how you manage to get that embedded in the university system, because that's, I think, really something that still many places struggle with, because these people, as you said, they don't act like research faculty, they are not under the same grant schemes, under the same evaluation schemes, under the same tenure track promotion schemes. So is that something you would say is already achieved in your system, or is that still in progress, and what do you think is an ideal solution there? Because I think this high-level technical expertise is becoming more and more essential. These people need a perspective, they need careers, and of course some of them will go away and lead cores in other places, but some should be retained and work for the organization in the long run. And so how do you see that developing?
So, staff, professional development. In my mind, they are compartmentalized into those who are pursuing this as a research faculty or eventually professor of practice track, and the expectations for promotion there are different than for staff working in. So the first, I've been adamant calling them faculty. These are faculty. How many of you are familiar with clinical faculty? So, being in a medical school 22 years, I thought clinical faculty meant a physician. And I didn't realize that there are clinical faculty in the music school, in the business school, in the law school. Clinical faculty are people with real-world experience who come to the university not as a tenure track, not as what I call the theoretical faculty, but with real-world experience. And that was what inspired me to go to the provost's office and said, wait a minute, I have another group like this. It's not real world per se, it is technical expertise that the faculty absolutely need. So it was an easy sell. The staff has been a little bit harder. That's HR, and HR just sees categories, job categories. So we were able to get better compensation for them and benefits. But I think it's always a struggle there. And what I tell, because we have a lot of PhD who are staff, is if you desire to turn into a core director someday, then you need to be leveraging that exempt, outward-focused, and getting on papers, because the absolute currency in this world, for faculty it's grants, in this world it's papers. Don't stop getting your names on papers. It doesn't, how often? Once every 2 years? That's enough just to show progress that you're engaged at that high quality level. Is that helpful?
Okay, in the interest of time, and because we have a panel discussion at the end of this session, I'm going to thank Phil and move on, but thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.